Dr. Bandakavi is the principal of PRISM College at Vaishakpatnam. She has written The Concept of Nation and the Life and Work of Swami Vivekananda and Paramahamsa Yogananda, Spiritual Path to Global Harmony. She will present her paper on the role of women in bringing about a new culture. Dr. Bandakavi. I will give you the, or you can take this one. You can begin your piece.
The sacred personalities of Sri Ramakrishna Order, Brother Monks and Matajis, Pranams, micro presenters of papers for the seminar, and also participants, my humble pranams to all. Actually, I take this opportunity as a grace by Swami Vivekananda showered on me. I feel I am too modest to share this dais when I am looking at the stalwarts speaking over here. But yet, when we are given a role, we have to try to fulfill the role and goal. In that way, I am placed here. Rather than presenting a paper, I say I would like to share my views with you today. Actually, for the last few hours, the ideas of all these scholars have been stimulating a lot. Yesterday's Sri Paranjapes and also Professor Rahas. Today, Mr. Srinivas' ideas and Swamiji's ideas. They have been shifting my papers here and there. So, I feel wherever there is quotation or some important points, I look into the paper. Otherwise, I feel like sharing my ideas with the elite gathering here. Right, the topic rather assigned to me is the role of women in contributing to new culture. So I have segmented my speech, rather my paper, into a few parts. Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda is New Age masters. What is the concept of culture? What do we mean by culture? And let me confess that I have confined myself only to Indian women. Indian women as visualized by Swami Vivekananda, and also the shift of the role or the prominence of women in pre-independent India and post-independent India, and what is the role they can play and they have to play. This is the main theme of my presentation. Here, to start with Sister Nivedita's quote on Swami Vivekananda, I quote, "I saw in him the heir to the spiritual discoveries and religious struggle of innumerable teachers and saints in the past of India and the world, and at the same time the pioneer and the prophet of a new and future order of development, a new and future order of development. I believe that each trace of those higher and uncommon modes of thought and consciousness to which he has the key has its significance for modern age." So Swami and Swami's master Sri Ramakrishna, both of them can be reckoned as New Age masters. And the life and work of Swami Vivekananda is a beckoning light to New Age. His vision of future world and future India is an outcome of great toil and study. He was inspired by Sri Ramakrishna, who was divinely blessed. Sri Ramakrishna conveyed the essence of all religions in the crucible of Advaita, the most intelligible language to all. Even the great scholars of the age were impressed and bowed down in front of him, being inspired before this great master. In the words of Swami Vivekananda, he pays tribute to this Mukta Jiva, summing up his contribution to humanity. I quote, "So at the dawn of this momentous epoch, the message of harmony of religions has been proclaimed. The boundless and all-embracing idea which has been hidden in the Vedantic scriptures and religion has been discovered and rediscovered and declared to humanity with a clarion call. So, both these masters, they have already understood that there are two types of knowledge and culture, and the world has to pick up in both ways, and that is why there should be new culture or new philosophy. Here let me go back to the word culture. Culture is a word which is as old as human civilization, right? It was there in antiquity. For example, we find the words like samskara and samskriti in Sanskrit, which indicate higher level of thinking, refined disposition of man. In Greek philosophy, in age-old Greek concepts also, we find this word culture, which signifies a refined status of mind with creativity. If we go to anthropology, in anthropology also the word culture means it is not an inbuilt characteristic or disposition, it is not genetical condition, but the qualities acquired through practice or through some sort of improvement, self-improvement. In that way, culture is not something which is inbuilt, but it has to be acquired through conscious effort. In that way, Swami says there are two cultures in the world, Western and Eastern. Actually, it has been reiterated by all speakers ever since the beginning of this seminar. We call it para, apara, knowledge, or we say Eastern and Western culture. Western culture, right from the beginning, has been visualizing man as a social entity. In order to give happiness, because the ultimate goal of any life is happiness, in order to make man happy, they have been raising so many discoveries and also theories, because ever since the Renaissance in the Europe, many scientific and technological developments were inaugurated and improved. And secondly, theories, social theories, political theories and economic theories, all these theories, they have been centering around, concentrating on human happiness, visualizing man as a social animal. But finally, as Swami Vivekananda rightly, appropriately identified, the whole toil was ending in only more and more conflict and strife, because it was only worldly knowledge or secular knowledge. There is no end to that happiness. Coming to East, yesterday Mr. Paranjape was explaining, yes, India has been the nucleus of the whole of the learning, just as Europe has been. Greco-Roman knowledge has been the root for all Western development in later centuries. Indian concept of inner science has become the bedrock of all the Eastern learning. And East concentrated more on internal world. Swami says it is more fabulous. There are many marvels inside the world. I mean, science and technology, they concentrate on the study of external world, whereas spirituality or this culture, it concentrates on inner world, which is deeper and vaster. So, East has started, more so in case of India, it visualizes man as divine entity, not as a social entity. That is why this inner science has given much poise and peace and explanation to every ins and outs of life. So compared to this, so Swami never denied, for that matter, Indian spirituality or Indian religion never denies any external life. There is something called pravritti and nivritti. As long as man is there, man's senses are there, man's mind is there, they go with some sort of icha and kriya, that is thought and action. They are never denied, because they are the part of Leela, and they are the part of the ongoing of the world. But pravritti should be always coupled with nivritti. Nivritti is, if we talk in terms of very easy terms, understandable to all of us, dharma, artha, kama, moksha, very, very interestingly and very wisely, the Indian spirituality has put dharma and moksha like borders to artha and kama. So, artha and kama should always be regulated by the path of dharma having moksha as the end. So when ends and means are all right, naturally the nature of the process of ardha and kama should be all right. So in that way, we must say there is, I don't say culture is a substitute to the word spirituality, but spirituality is very much connected to, in Indian context, with culture. So Swami says the theme of Indian life is spirituality, and religion is the bedrock of our life. And Swami always used to say spirituality, Vedanta, Advaita, religion, all these are not empty terms. They are not theoretical concepts, but they are lifestyles. Unless we translate them into our life, it is very, very difficult for us to understand what they are. They sound to be very, very abstract. In that way, culture is nothing but, I mean, as far as India is concerned, spirituality, there is no culture without spiritual sense, according to us. And this spirituality changes from person to person and nation to nation and time to time, because they depend on the flux of life. It is nothing wrong. For that matter, the 19th century poet and essayist of England, Matthew Arnold, says in his work Culture and Anarchy, he says culture is a constant attempt on the part of every human being to improve himself and picking up new things. And he gives a contrast also. Whenever there is a process of improving culture, there is a clash between elite and non-elite group, which he calls as anarchy. So we should be able to take very careful strides when we apply ourselves to adaptation of culture, right? So now the actual crux of the point comes. We are not able to decipher what type of culture we require. I mean, as we all know, all of us have been heavily influenced by modernization, globalization, and also industrialization, where the shift of focus is sometimes very, very terrible and thought-provoking. Right? In this particular phenomena, I would like to quote once again Swami, where he says, I quote from his work, Swami Vivekananda and himself, a compiled edition. This world will be a mixture of good and evil, of happiness and misery. This wheel will ever go up and come down. Dissolution and resolution is inevitable law. Blessed are those who struggle to go beyond. This is Swami's quotation, I unquote. And secondly, even Radha Krishna also says that whenever there is some deterioration or whenever there is a failure on the part of humanity, we need not worry it is a failure, because it is always the upthrust given by failure that is very, very essential for humanity to always rise. And for that matter, we have to believe in two things. First of all, there is a natural law which tells that there is always an indication of regeneration in degeneration. Regeneration and degeneration, again followed by degeneration, is a cyclic process in law. I mean, it is all these dvandvas are very, very common in Leela of the creation. It will be there. Then what is the role of human beings? It is always try to Ujjogam Purusha Lakshanam. Purusha means it is human being. I mean, as far as the Vedanta is concerned, no, there is no difference, gender sensitization, whether it is male or female. It is Atma that is more important. It is the consciousness, human consciousness. The general inclination, the natural inclination of every jiva is to evolve into better. Evolve into the next better, unna unnati. That means being and becoming. That is a constant natural instinct, natural urge of human soul. But what happens is, there is something in the middle called mind. That mind is the negotiator between the Atma and the body. It will be always pulling us towards lower nature, whereas our natural inclination is towards higher nature. So mind is the main culprit here, and it is contaminated. We have to see that the mind is kept in discipline. What happens is, this mind, if it loses its discipline, it sinks to, instinct. It becomes as much as an animal. When it is properly trained, it becomes intellectual. But the next higher side is always intuition. So now the goal of every human life is to raise from instinct to intellect and convert intellect into intuition. This is what we are supposed to do. And maybe this is the main gamut of culture, human culture. Swami talks about human culture as quoted by Swami Rangadananda in Human Excellence. What Europe has done, it has given character excellence. That means they got confidence, they have an authority that led to, of course, hegemony, of political hegemony over the whole of the world. But it gave some sort of a character excellence to Europe and other Western countries, whereas Swami says we have to think in terms of human excellence. Human excellence is possible when knowledge is coupled with wisdom. Our knowledge is balanced with wisdom. This is the end of the whole of life. So coming back to culture, Eastern culture and Western culture are both are equal and both are equally necessary for mankind. That is what Swami felt. As Parivrajaka, he toured all over India and you could feel the situation of India at that time. And he was really touched by the ignorance and also the degradation and subjugation. Then he wanted to have a key for the material prosperity of these Indian people, for which he got a divine intuition to go to West, where after going to West, he observed the progress and prosperity, and he came to understand that the key for the whole of the prosperity is nothing but science and technology. At the same time, he was not insensitive to the repercussions. Let me not use the word negative repercussions, but there is some sort of a strife, competition, some sort of bloodshed, greed and all that were generated out of too much of materialism. Then he openly, very deliberately exhorted to them that they require some sort of a spiritual sense, which is the wealth of ancient the wealth of the ancient land of India. And after coming back to India, after his study of West as a periplus, he came back to India and he did not leave any segment of India. He addressed youth, he addressed Rajas, he addressed the social reformers, he addressed almost all community in India, and he said it is not reformation India requires, but it is total change. And he said the Western education, some sort of a consistent materialism is required for the betterment of the physical status of India. But he gave a warning, every land has its own theme. If the land loses its theme, it loses its life. So he said spirituality is the keynote of Indian life. Better, it is a blood of our Indian life. Never lose it. Now, coming to the role of women, actually Swami studied the life of women in India and also women in West. He says the American women and European women, he was a great admirer of their freedom, for that matter. American women who extended excellent hospitality to him. He really appreciated their liberty, their education, their freedom, and the way they move very freely in the society. And he admires that British ladies were more intelligent and more matured. At the same time, he explains to them about the natural, in the words of Romain Rolland, he says Indian women are naturally chaste and pure. So he says, whereas Western women stand for womanhood, Indian women stand for motherhood. And he feels that Indian women should raise to the status of both womanhood as well as the original motherhood. He comes back to India and he gives a great call that youth should be inspired, the common man should be taken care of, and women should be emancipated. This is what he visualized of the India, our country. Right. Then Swami never felt very distressed about Indian women, because he traces the history, I mean, the condition of women right from ancient in ancient times. Because we all know that let me read out just few paragraphs to trace the condition of women. Swami's study of ancient Indian women provided him with a long list of women who enjoyed respect and freedom. According to Indian scholars like Patanjali and Katyayana, Indian women enjoyed equal status at par with men. Evidences tell us that Vedic women received education and got married at a matured age. They had the freedom to select their life partners. There were seers among them like Gargi and Maitreya. During the period of Buddhism and Jainism also, women were allowed even into religious order. The historical evidences show that women were educated at great centers like Nalanda and Taxila. Romain Rolland, in his book on Swami's biography, mentions European scholars of 19th century regarded Indian women as naturally chaste and more virtuous. It is only during medieval ages, on account of several factors, women's position in India got deteriorated. During this period, practices like child marriages, polygamy, parda system, and suppression of women started. In spite of these adverse conditions, there were women in both North India and South India who became rulers, fighters, artists, and writers. I don't want to go into details of the statistics because of the constraint of time. The actual degeneration went to pathetic stage by 18th century with practices like sati, jauhar, child marriages, forced marriages, and ill treatment of women. Records shows that even reaction also started parallelly with an objective to emancipate women. During British rule itself, social reformers like Raja Ramohan Roy, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, Jyotirao Phule strove for the betterment of women. Right from 1847 to 1947, there were hundreds of people who played vital role in emancipating women by establishing schools and colleges for development of women. There were many women right from Jhansi Rani to Sarojini Naidu who came to forefront on their own and participated in the struggle of independence, exhibiting undaunted courage. That means even in the most adverse conditions, there were always constant efforts also to raise Indian women to the natural dignity or status. The post-independent and in the post-independent India, Indian constitution guaranteed many rights, through acts like women's equality, equal opportunities, equality for work, discrimination against discrimination, so on. And this seva, self-help and self-employment, women associations established in 1919 played a vital role in bringing about women local leaders like Medha and social, economical, political rights guaranteed women in India some meager assurances, but still atrocities do continue. Right. Again, we have to come back to Swami's encouragement, a pat on our back. Good and bad, they go hand in hand. That is the nature of the universal condition. Now, in spite of all the adverse conditions, women were able to prove themselves from time to time, and there was external help to women to to emancipate them, and an effort on the part of womanhood to ameliorate themselves. Now, comparatively, in the condition of women, Indian women is better on account of opportunity to education and some sort. Here and there, let us leave the atrocities and all apart. Compared to the previous ages, now the condition of women in India is far better. In such friendly conditions, what is the role of Indian women? So, is there any occasion for us to play a role? Yes, definitely there is. Because in and around, for the last, in the speeches of all our speakers, we came to understand the evils of some technology or social networking, and among Indian youngsters we are able to see misuse of drugs, alcoholism, careless sex habits without love, and atrocities, either murders or criminal attitude or suicidal tendencies. All these, they come under ignorance. Swami always says most of the mistakes, as Socrates in those days says most of the mistakes do occur out of not knowing the repercussions. The smallest example, if the room is dark, we say Rajju Sarpa Bhranti. In a dark room, if we stump on a rope, we shriek. Because we don't know that it is after all a rope, but we think, we assume and feel apprehensive that it is serpent, it might cause some harm to us. If we put on a light, immediately we think, oh, this is only a rope. So even the smallest ignorance is giving so much of panic to us, then comparatively more ignorance will give us more confusion, more conflict and more apprehensions in society. That is what is happening. Only thing is, if we have proper knowledge, knowledge is power. And knowledge society, we have been listening so much about knowledge, and right? So that knowledge is required. What knowledge? Right knowledge which does away all these apprehensions and fear and ignorance from man is now required. That is called Nivritti. So that Nivritti Marga only will help us to develop a sense of detachment which is required for us to, or it will be a correct panacea for the excessive materialism in the present day world. And finally, coming to women's role. Actually, the present day women, why present day every time? Women's vital role is as a mother, right? A mother is an extended teacher. A teacher is an extended parent, and a parent is an extended teacher. And the very first institution of learning for a child is home. So that home should never fail. Actually, unfortunately, today in our homes, refrigerators are mothers and TVs are the fathers for the children. So we have to reverse this. It is not a machine that can become a mother, and it is not a machine that can become a father. So women's role starts there. And secondly, women as an individual. Women as an engine driver to family, and women as an employer, and women as in higher positions, in greater positions. This is very, very important. So I'll make it as compact as possible. As a mother, what can a woman do? See, how many people today, how many mothers are really talking about an epic or a Purana? Because in our country, this is a Rishiprokta land, a land of Rishis teachings. All those Rishis with their Darsanikata, their intuition, they could visualize the Ishvara, Vishveshvara, Vishwa, and the relation between man and God, the unity between man and God, and the universe and the man, the creator behind this universe. If the relation is really, it is difficult to understand. That is why they are translated by great seers and saints into the shape of Puranas. And again, the Puranas, if they are complicated by masters and teachers, they are given, they are interpreted into intelligible language. And again, it is reduced to essays, and also, it is translated into even easiest mode of, an understandable language. But how many of us as mothers are able to teach the children all these intricacies of human life and human relations into simple language? For example, what does an epic, let us not discuss logically whether epics have taken place or not. Whether taken place or not, that is immaterial. If it is a logical question, let us not worry about logics, but let us concentrate on the types. If a mother can explain to the son about Mahabharata, she can explain what type, she can deal with the types. What made Arjuna very popular? What made Duryodhana, in spite of having all the assets and knowledge, unpopular? What made Karna mixed personality? So topographically, if we take like that, so we can always instill the concept. So these are the values. Those values give the talent, the real foil of humanity, and make them great. If you turn to Ramayana, so why Bharata and Lakshmana are considered to be greatest brothers in the history of our culture? And why Ravanasura, even though he is a great devotee of Lord Shiva, and why nobody names their children as Ravanas, right? They name their children as Rama or Lakshmana or Bharata. Why is that like that? So if we start explaining in simple language, the children will be able to understand. And how many of us really bother to show a sunrise or a sunset? Because if we observe nature, we learn, that is a creation of Vishwanatha. The whole universe itself is full of order and some sort of a regulation. And the highest principles of renunciation and service. In Sanskrit, there are highest slokas where they say, in this world, we find very small things which we daily see, like a tree or a river, which they are always for renunciation and service to mankind. They do not expect anything in return. Giving and giving and giving. So, every day we can see this rising sun and setting sun. And there is a lot of science in Aditya Hridaya. There is a lot of philosophy in visible world. So how many mothers are able to show sunrise or this concrete jungle really is making us unaware of the marvels of nature. So these few things and small precepts of day to day, giving respect, sharing and caring, and human relations. Unitary family, nuclear family itself has become a curse, because what role models we used to find in joint families and large families are now absent.